Welcome to everyone for the Her Sport, Her Way grant information session. It's great to see so many people here. My name's Phil Wishart and I head up the marketing and communications team, and I'm joined by our Chief Executive, Karen Jones, who will be running through the session. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands on which we're all meeting today in this virtual environment, and pay my respects to Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging. A little bit of housekeeping before I hand over to Karen. As I said, the session will be recorded today. We will publish that on Monday for you. And then also we will put a copy of the presentation up, and those will both be available on the Her Sport Her Way grants webpage. Throughout the session, if you do have questions about the content today, just pop your details in the chat. And if I can remind everyone to pop themselves on mute, that would be excellent. So just so we can improve the quality of the call and keep your cameras switched off. In terms of the questions that do go into the chat feed today, we will address them with an FAQs document, which we'll publish early next week, so that everyone's getting the same level of consistent information, and to ensure that we provide you accurate information and we don't just give you something on the fly. So with that in mind, I'll hand over to Karen for the session.
Thanks, Phil. Hi, everybody, and good morning. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today for the information session on the Her Sport, Her Way grant program. Thank you for your time this morning. Look, it has been a fantastic week so far with International Women's Day celebrations and our Her Sport, Her Way awards that were held on Wednesday. It's great to see so much interest in Her Sport, Her Way, and particularly the Her Sport, Her Way grants. Last year, we actually saw 27 projects funded, and despite the challenges of COVID-19, we've actually seen some really great outcomes across the sports sector, so thank you. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing the applications for this round of funding, so I'm really looking forward to seeing all of those applications and all of those projects come through. And as you can see here on the screen now of the overview of the topics that we're actually presenting today, we hope that you'll find all of these topics really helpful in preparing your application. Look, we will also run through a few FAQs and we've already received a lot of questions already. So we'll actually run through those at the end of the presentation today, and we will address questions in the chat by publishing the answers early next week. But if we get a chance to publish the answers today, we will do so. So please, if you do have any questions, pop them in the chat today. For those of you who are new to Her Sport, Her Way, this is year 2 of a 4-year strategy. The Her Sport, Her Way grant program is a key initiative under our strategy. The program is designed to support New South Wales state sporting organisations and state sporting organisations for people with a disability to develop and deliver new initiatives to increase participation of women and girls both on and also off the field. This year's program has a focus on diversity and inclusion of underrepresented groups of women and girls, which aligns with the Office of Sport priorities, and our focus on underrepresented populations, including females, culturally and linguistically diverse communities, people with disability, and also Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Now for the important date, and you'll hear me repeat this a number of times during today's presentation. We need to get your applications into us by the 12th of April, and that's at 5 o'clock, so 5 p.m. on the 12th of April, and that's just a little over 4 weeks away. Let's now talk a little bit about program funding. So up to $650,000 is available, and organisations can apply for grants from $10,000 all the way up to $50,000. Organisations may apply for more than one project or multiple locations if you like. However, the maximum amount available at any one organisation is $50,000. Let's move on now to eligible applicants. And the eligible applicants are state sporting organisations and also state sporting organisations for people with disability that are currently recognised by the Office of Sport. So please check your eligibility by clicking the link in the program guidelines, or you can also check by visiting the Office of Sport website. The purpose of the Her Sport Her Way grant is to enable additional opportunities for women and girls throughout New South Wales. State sporting organisations and state sporting organisations for people with disability are best placed to develop initiatives that can be delivered in partnership with community sport clubs across the state. Hence why both state sporting organisations and state sporting organisations for people with disability are the two categories that are eligible. Now let's move on to the program objectives. Projects must commence in 2021 and funding will be prioritised for those projects that can be delivered within 18 months of signing the funding agreement. What we would really like to see is an increase in the number of girls and women playing sport and improving the retention, particularly of adolescent girls. We also really want to see an increase in the number of women in leadership positions, both on and off the field. And finally, we also want to see an improvement in gender inclusive sporting cultures and environments. So again, please, to find out more information about Her Sport Her Way and the Office of Sport Priorities, you can visit the Office of Sport website. Or also, again, I point you to the program guidelines and the links within those guidelines. Let's now move on to the funding categories. There are three categories which applicants can apply for and apply for funding under. The first is participation. The type of projects aligned to this could include projects designed to attract new female participants and or address the adolescent drop-off issue. It could also include programs that engage key influencers to facilitate girls' participation in sport, such as parents, coaches, or even teachers. Also, think about community activation events, forums, and education sessions that are focused on sharing experiences and successful engagement strategies for women and girls in sport. Examples for the leadership category include projects that lead to improved pathways and the visibility of female coaches and officials. For example, things like mentoring and scholarship programs. Maybe programs or projects designed to encourage and support young women to advance their careers in sport and aspire to leadership positions with a youth engagement approach. Or another example could be initiatives that recognise and increase visibility of role models to inspire participation for women and girls. For example, things like case studies and digital storytelling. And finally, the last category, which is enhancing the capability of organisations. Examples could include projects that increase the effectiveness of boards and management in relation to female participation, including improvements to policies, processes, performance, stakeholder relationships, strategic planning, and whole of sport communication. You could also include projects that build a positive gender inclusive culture across an organisation, or maybe even research projects that contribute to the evidence base about female participants to assist organisations to make decisions about operations, planning, and future delivery options. For example, that could include things like a facility audit, data collection, or maybe even consumer insights. You will hear more about these three categories at our think tank, which I'll talk about in some upcoming slides. Let's now move on to some of the key considerations in your application and project. So on to some key points about the grant program. There are really some important points on this slide. So the amount requested should actually reflect the scale and also the reach of the project and the organisation's contribution to the project. Organisations must contribute to the cost of the project, and the co-contribution can be made up of organisations' funds, maybe staff contribution, voluntary labour, partner contribution, or other resources directly related to the project. Projects must be able to commence in 2021 and be completed within 18 months of signing the funding agreement. So please keep those key things in mind. In relation to project planning, look, we understand you may need help in delivering new initiatives, And we encourage you to work with your networks of associations and clubs and seek partnerships with like-minded organisations with specific experience working with women and girls, and also your target audience. You'll see some great examples showcased at our think tank. We also have some great resources and tools to assist you with your planning, and I encourage you to use the Her Sport, Her Way participation planning tool and to also attend the think tank, which is where we will share the latest research, the latest insights, and some great learnings from round one participants, or recipients, I should say, not participants, recipients. It's really important that you do take the time to prepare your application and the scope of your project, including the evaluation requirements of the program. So please make sure you do make the time for those elements. For more information, visit the Her Sport, Her Way webpage, and again, check the links in the grant guidelines. Now on to the all-important application process. Before you get into the application submission, I'd like to remind you to double check your eligibility and plan your application using some of the tools and resources available to you that we've mentioned in earlier slides. When you're ready to submit, this will actually be done through the Office of Sport's Grants Online system, which many of you would already be accustomed to using. If you don't know the login details of your organisation, then please don't worry, don't hesitate, just reach out to the Office of Sports Grants Unit. You'll need to register your project. You'll need to fill in the sections and attach supporting documentation, and then you can hit the submit button. Once again, the date, the all-important submission date, is the 12th of April. And again, I remind you that that's just a little over 4 weeks away. So please, I'd encourage you to log into the system in the coming weeks so that you can double check that you're preparing everything that you need. Once again, once all the applications close, all applications will undergo an initial eligibility check prior to being forwarded onto the grant assessment panel for assessment. Applications will be assessed against 4 criteria. The first is strategic justification. Second is the demonstrated need. Third is project affordability. And fourth is project deliverability. You can read more about the eligibility and assessment criteria in the grant guidelines. So again, please take the time to do this to ensure you're putting your best application forward. Let's now move on to the all-important timeline and some of the key dates. So as I mentioned before, we have the think tank on the 23rd of March, and this is a great opportunity for you to all collaborate and share information across the organisations. So I encourage you to have some thoughts about your projects in the lead up to this and use the think tank as an opportunity to refine your ideas prior to submitting your application. After applications close on the 12th of April, we'll be assessing the projects with a view to announcing the successful projects in May. The grants unit will distribute funding agreements, and following the evaluation workshop, we'll be looking to get these agreements returned by the 30th of June 2021. You will then have 18 months to complete your project and finalise the grant with an acquittal by March 2023 at the latest. Now to finish up, I'd like to address some of the frequently asked questions from across several of our grant programs, and also some questions relating to the Her Sport, Her Way grant program, which we've already received. For any questions in the chat feed today, we will look to publish responses on our website early next week, along with a copy of this presentation and the webinar video, so that all applicants have equal access to information. So if you think of any questions after the session, don't worry, you can email the grants unit and we will continue to update our FAQs on the website as they come in over the next month. So let's go on to the questions that we've already received. So our first question is, can eligible organisations still apply if they have an unacquitted grant? The answer to that is yes. Organisations are expected to meet the requirements of their funding agreement. Eligible applications will be assessed against the program aims, focus, objectives and assessment criteria, and it may consider acquittals. Any organisation with outstanding financial acquittals and project reports, please just reach out and contact the Office of Sports Grants Unit. Next question. I was successful or unsuccessful last round. Is it possible to get feedback on my application? The answer to that is yes, you can. The grants unit can provide a summary of assessor feedback to unsuccessful applicants from the first round of the Her Sport, Her Way grants. So please, again, don't hesitate and reach out. Next question. Can an organisation's co-contribution be from a partner organisation? Yes. If you have an established partnership and the agreement includes a financial component, then yes, this can be included in the applicant contribution. Funding can be included as part of the overall budget or scope of the project as well. Next question, can I apply for a second phase of the project that was successful in round one? Of course, the answer is yes. Applications for projects that have already been funded by the New South Wales Government must include significant new or additional scope to be considered. So please, if you were successful in round one, take that into consideration when applying for an extension of the program, for instance. Next question, can the Office of Sport review my draft application? Look, the Office of Sport staff can provide information to potential applicants on interpretation of the guidelines, including the types of projects eligible for funding. They can also provide advice relating to the online application process. Again, please remember incomplete applications or applications submitted after the closing time and date may not be considered eligible, and they need to be submitted by 5 p.m. on Monday, the 12th of April, 2021. Next question. When will I know if my organisation is successful? Look, you will be advised in writing, which will include the requirements to accept the grant, and also you'll be invited to enter into a funding agreement with the New South Wales Government and particularly the Office of Sport. Next, what if I receive funding for the same project from another government agency? Grant funding from another New South Wales state government agency is not permitted as a co-contribution for the same component of the project. So however, co-contributions from local and federal funding sources are permitted to be used for this purpose though. Other New South Wales government grant funding must be used for a different component of the project. So again, please keep that in mind and make sure there's no double dipping on the funding. I think we're about to wrap up. I think we're now on to our last slide. So look, that concludes everything that we have for you all today. And as I mentioned, we will address any questions that might have popped up in the chat feed by uploading responses to the grants page early next week. But of course, if you do have any more questions, you can check the grant guidelines or you can call or email us at the Office of Sport for support. And please don't hesitate to do that. Also, don't forget to sign up for the think tanks to see some great case studies from projects from the first round, and also to help support the development of your application. So please register for the think tanks too. Finally, I would like to thank you all for your time today. I wish you all the very best for your application. I look forward to reviewing them and looking through them and hopefully being incredibly inspired around the Her Sport, Her Way grant program and seeing some of those fantastic projects move into delivery. So thank you, everybody. Phil, I'll now hand back to you.
Thanks very much, Karen. We don't have any questions in the chat, but as Karen said, if you do have questions now that you've had a bit of a chance to process this information, please feel free to send them through to the grants unit email address, which is grantsunit@sport.nsw.gov.au. We will publish this video on Monday along with a copy of the presentation. And for those of you that signed up via the website, you did have the option to select to register for both the information session and the think tank. So if you have selected the think tank, we will be sending out the calendar invitation a day or so prior, like we did for this session this morning. If you haven't signed up, just pop back to the Her Sport Her Way grants page and you can click on that link to register your details for the think tank and we'll send you the information. It should be a really great session and we've seen some great projects so far. So thanks everyone for your time. We hope you have a good weekend and best of luck in preparing your applications.